Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Today, me and my friends would like to present news and bias analysis, and it is about a news that's involving Israel and Palestinians. The source of the article is from NBC News, a US television and radio news network. Its authors are Anastasia and Ref Sanchez. The source is not credible when it comes to matter involving Israel and Palestine because NBC News is biased toward Israel. NBC News was created in the US during 1940s after all. The time period of its establishment basically made it important for the agency to be Israel. Naturally, both members are also sympathy towards the Israel government since they are working under NBC News and they do not want to lose their job. Sketcher even went as far as to learn Hebrew, the national language of Israel. They convince readers that she writes about Israel's are authentic. Meanwhile, Raf Sanchez went to Israel to report news to the NBC that can make it look like everyone and everything in Israel is about to be murdered and destroyed. Firsthand, therefore, the source of the text is not credible and cannot be trusted in this case.
The audience of the article are Zionists, Jews, and Western citizens. Why do we say that these people are the audiences that NBC News wants to cater to? The reason is simple. They're doing this by catering to them. This will show to the people in these countries that their governments are supporting the war on the Israeli side. This will confuse people about the state of the war that is currently going on, always being misled into thinking that they should hate Hamas, Palestinians, and even the United Nations, rallying against their governments on huge geopolitical issues such as the persecution Palestinians by Israel, a hard task to commit to. Besides that, doing this strengthens the diplomatic relationship between countries in the Western world with the Israel, as they are representing them as heroes and warriors when they are actually villains and devils who has caused endless suffering. For these reasons, we can say that Zionists, Jews, and Western citizens are the target audience. The article is absolutely opinionated and very minimalist factual. The claims made in the article were based on the statements Israel, which obviously portray itself in a positive light. Israel does not stop at positive comments about itself, however, as anything that can be misconstrued to demolish Hamas, Palestinians, and the United Nations were also written in the text. For example, look at the passage. A counselor at UNRWA school is alleged to have taken part in the kidnapping of a female hostage on October 7. An elementary school teacher is accused of having participated in the attack on Re'im, where dozens of Israelis were killed and hostages were taken. Another teacher is alleged to have equipped himself with anti-tank weapons the night before the attack. The word allegations shows that there is no evidence given by Israeli intelligence dossiers that accuse the workers of the United Nations Relief Work Agency of committing several actions ranging from kidnapping Israelis to supplying logistical support for Hamas terrorist attack. However, NBC News seemed to take no questions on publishing this article written by Anna Schechter and Ralph Sanchez. That being so, we can conclude that NBC News posts articles based only on their biased opinions.
The article is extremely biased. This is because no background history can be found written anywhere in it. The beginning of the occupation of Palestine can be traced back to the formation of the Zionist Federation in 1918. It was allegedly created to campaign for a permanent homeland for Jews. So they directly influenced the establishment of the British controlled Mandatory Palestine in 1920 after the Ottoman Empire lost in the First World War. After a series of failed revolts from local Arabs and the deportation of illegal immigrants to Mandatory Palestine from Europe, of course, the UK's government granted Israel its independence 3 years after the end of the Second World War in 1948. This marks the beginning of the 76-year-long oppression that Palestinians continue to face to this day. Following this, over 750,000 Palestinians were expelled from their homes, and at least 15,000 of them were killed in the brutal genocide known as the Nakba, meaning the catastrophe. So by the end of the Nakba, Israel had occupied a total of 78% of the land of mandatory Palestine. Meanwhile, Gaza and the West Bank were controlled by Egypt and Jordan, respectively. The next major event is the Six Day War, which happened in 1967. It resulted in another exodus of Palestinians, referred to as the Nakba, meaning the setback. Over 280,000 Palestinians were forced to flee from the territories that Israel had captured, which is Gaza and the West Bank, and even Egypt's Sinai Peninsula and Syria's Golan Heights were annexed. After this, the majority of Palestinians had to live outside the boundaries of mandatory Palestine. In the 1973 Yom Kippur War, Israel continues to take slightly more of Egypt and Syria's territory. So, Egypt went on to normalize relations with Israel to gain its territory back, and Jordan followed suit, and Syria refused to do this. Then, two intifadas, meaning uprisings, occurred in two separate decades, called the First Intifada from 1987 to 1993, and then the Second Intifada from 2000 to 2005, which were curbed by Israel successfully. In 2007, Hamas took control of the Gaza Strip after Israel stopped occupying it 2 years prior. This forced Israel to start blockading the Strip with the help of Egypt, effectively turning it into an open-air prison. From that year until September 2023, small-scale fighting continued to happen between Israel and Palestinian soldiers and civilians. Tired of their people being persecuted and murdered, Hamas launched a full-scale attack on Israel on October 7th, 2023. The resistance continues to fight for their freedom until present day. Therefore, without telling the background of the October 7th attack, NBC News is robbing of the main reason why Hamas did it in the first place. It is also obvious that this company isn't willing to accept any other sources that is not from Israeli intelligence and its Western allies, as no Arab or Western media are mentioned. On that account, it is easy to say that the article is very biased towards Israel. So the first type of media bias in the article is content bias. This is when the author's treatment of the parties in political conflicts is biased towards only one side of the conflict. To provide evidence of this type of bias in the article, we can take the quote: at least 12 employees of the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees participated in and aided the October 7th terrorist attack on Israel, according to Israeli intelligence dossiers obtained by NBC News, which accused the workers of actions ranging from kidnapping Israelis to supplying logistical support. Simply taking the words of Israel as gospel is the perfect example of content bias. The only statements written in the article that comes from the United Nations are them taking action on the workers who weren't proven to commit the acts, which essentially makes it look like Israel's information is concrete when this truly is not the case at all. The next kind of media bias you can find in the text is coverage bias. The definition of this media bias is when the media chooses to report only negative news about one party or ideology. As proof, look at the passage Israel has accused UNRWA of being used by Hamas to conceal weapons and entrances to tunnels. Current and Current Israeli officials in ABC told ABC News that Hamas used UNRWA schools and hospitals as covers for its terrorist operations and fighting the Israeli Defense Forces during the current war. Despite the fact that the UNRWA is in Gaza to help Palestinians live under the terrible conditions, NBC News only takes into account that what Israel claims the UNRWA is, and not what Palestinians actually see, nor do they take other sources that are actually credible. Consequently, we can say that the two types of biases in the article are content bias and coverage bias. So that marks the end of our presentation on the six criteria that we will look at to analyze the bias in this newspaper article. Thank you.